Hello students, today you have English lecture. We'll do poem number 4.4 and the name of the poem is The Height of the Ridiculous. It's on your page number 171 in your textbook. The poem name is The Height of the Ridiculous. Ridiculous means what? Too funny to believe. Now, what you're going to see in this poem. I will just tell you a short introduction. The Height of the Ridiculous is a humorous poem written by Oliver Wendell Holmes, was an American novelist and essayist. So you know, novelist means to write novel. The poem is written for enjoyment with plenty of funny expressions. So there is some funny expressions in this poem. Expression. The main purpose of the poet is to simply entertain his audience. So what was the main reason or main objective of the poet is to entertain his audience. This poem describes his own fictional experience of writing poem that was so funny. It made his servant fall sick for 10 days after reading it. So the poet has written something, and when the poet's servant seen what his master has written, he opened it, he read it, and the poet's servant laughed so much that he had fallen sick for 10 days, and poor poet had to take care of him. And henceforth, the poet decided he will not write any funny poems. Now, pay attention, the height of the ridiculous. I wrote some lines once on a time. So once I written some lines in a wondrous merry mood and thought as usual men would say they were exceeding good. They were so queer, so very queer. I laughed as I would die, albeit in the general way, a sober man am I. I called my servant, and he came. How kind it was of him to mind a slender man like me, he of the might limp. This to the printer I exclaimed, and in my humorous way I added, has trifling jest, there'll be the devil to pay. He took the paper and I watched and saw him peep within. At the first line he read, his face was all upon the grin. He read the next, the grin grew broad and shot from year to year. He read the third, a chuckling noise I now began to hear. The fourth he broke into a roar. The fifth his waistband split. The sixth he burst 5 buttons and tumbled in a fit. 10 days and nights with sleepless eye I watched that wretched man, and since I never dared to write as funny as I can. So students, I read the whole poem. Now we will try to understand the meaning of the stanzas. Now look first stanza. I wrote some lines once on a time in wondrous merry mood, and thought as usual man would say they were exceeding good. They were so queer, so very queer. I laughed as I would die, albeit in the general way, a sober man I am. Now, what do you mean wondrous? Wondrous means what? Delightful. See here. Delightful. Wondrous means delightful, inspiring, a feeling of wonder. Once on time. Once on a time. Now, once on a time means in the past, especially a long time ago. So, a long time ago. Exceeding. Exceeding means excellent. Choir. Choir means something which is very strange. Albeit. Albeit means despite the fact. Sober. What do you mean by sober? Sober means sensible, clear-headed. Now, pay attention, students. The poem begins on a note of self-praise, where the poet complains himself for composing such fine lines. Such fine lines means one day the poem composed a beautiful poem. Once when the poet was in a very happy mood. So when the poet was in a merry mood, he composed one poem. He thought people would appreciate them and say that they were very good or very excellent. And what the poet thought that after reading my poem, people would appreciate my poem. The lines were funny, and even though he was generally a sober means what? He was a sensible man. While reading them, he could not control his laughter. So when the poet himself was writing the poem, he was not able to control his laughter. I called my servant, and he came. How kind it was of him to mind a slender man like me, he of the might limp. This to the printer I exclaim, and in my humorous way I added, as a trifling jet, there be the devil to pay. Now, slender. What do you mean by slender? Slender means slim or a thin man. It's called a slender. Might. Might means what? Strength, strong, very strong man. Limb. Limb. Limb means what? Arms, legs, etc. Organs. So any part of the body is called as limb. And mighty limb. Mighty limb means what? Strong, strong, but muscular. Trifling. Trifling means what? Insignificant, not important. Now, trifling jest. Trifling jest means what? A small, simple joke of not much important. Jest means joke. Now, pay attention. The poem called his servant a strong man. So, author's servant was a very strong man. He remarked that it was kind of the servant to look after a thin man like him. The poet then handed the poem to his servant. So what the poet did, he handed the poem to his servant to take it to the printer. So the poet had written a poem and he told his servant who was very strong that take this poem to the printer. He added in a very amusing way that there would be strong reactions to it. Now, he took the paper and I means over here, the poet was watching and saw him peep with him. At the first line, he read, his face was all upon the green. He read the next, the green grew broad and shot from year to year. He read the third, a chuckling noise. I now began to hear. Now here, green. What you mean by green? Green means a broad smile. Chuckling. Chuckling means laughing quietly. It's called chuckling. Chuckling when you laugh in a very quiet manner. It's called chuckling. Now pay attention. After hearing the strange remark, the servant took the paper but was very much curious and anxious to know what was written. So the poet's servant wanted to know what the poet has written. So he peeped into the lines. So he peeped means what? He read the lines and started reading them. The servant read the first line and started grinning. So the servant read the first line and he started grinning. Grinning means what? He had a broad smile on his face. When he read the third line, he started laughing softly, which could be heard now. So when the servant read the third line, he started laughing very softly. Now, the fourth, the fourth he broke into a roar. The fifth, his waistband split. The sixth, he burst 5 buttons and tumbled in a fit. 10 days and nights, with sleepless eye, I watched the wretched man, and since I never dared to write as funny as I can. Now roar. Roar means what? Loud sound of laughter. Okay, to laugh very loudly is called roar. Waistband. What you mean by waist? Waistband means belt, which we uh, help our pants or to look attractive. We tie a waistband like a belt. Burst. Now see here, burst. What you mean by burst? Open by force. That is called burst. Tumble. To fail, to fall. Tumble means to fall. Fit. Now fit means what? Wild with emotion. Wretched. Here, wretched means a helpless condition which you are not able to control. And broke into. Okay, what you mean by broke into? Broke into means suddenly began to do something. Now pay attention. At the fourth line, he started roaring with laughter. He started laughing very loudly when he read the fourth line. When he read the fifth line, he laughed so hard that his waistband slipped. So when the servant read the fifth line of the poem, he laughed so much loudly that his waistband broke. After reading the sixth line, he was laughing so hard as though he was suffering from sudden attacks of laughter. So when he read the sixth line, he laughed so much that the laughter turned into a sudden attack. In the process, he even spilled his shirt buttons open. So he laughed so much that his shirt buttons were open. He tumbled in the fit and fell down. So he kept on laughing so much. He fell to the ground. The poet had to take care of his servants for 10 days and nights without sleeping. So after all this incident, the poet had to take care of his servants for how many days? For 10 days and nights. Since after this incident, the poet has firmly resolved never dare to write such comical or funny line again. So after seeing the condition of his servant, what the poet decided that henceforward he will not write any funny poems. So students, hope so you have understood the poem. Now on your page number 169, do activity. Yeah, do activity 1, do activity 2, activity 3, activity 4, 5 and 6. You can just go through it. Then come to page number 172. On your page number 172, do activity 1, activity 2, activity 3, activity 4, page number 173. So all this is for your homework. 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9 are omitted. Don't do those activities. Thank you, students.